who was hailed as one of the most groundbreaking bassists in heavy metal, an innovator with a fearless approach that redefined the role of his instrument. Cliff Burton didn't just play bass, he sculpted the very essence of what Metallica would become. But in 1986, tragedy struck, marking one of the darkest moments in the band's history. For Lars Ulrich, losing Cliff has always been a deeply personal wound. Known for keeping his emotions locked away, Lars has rarely spoken about Burton, letting the music carry his legacy instead. But now, after all these years, he has finally opened up about Cliff's massive impact on Metallica's early days, and how his presence is still felt within the band. When Metallica first laid eyes on Cliff Burton in 1982, he was tearing up the stage with the San Francisco band Trauma. What set him apart? His bass playing wasn't just about holding down the rhythm, it was alive, melodic, and pushing boundaries no one else dared to cross. His mastery of effects like distortion and the wah-wah pedal gave his sound a wild, unmistakable edge. But getting Burton to join Metallica wasn't easy. He had one condition: if they wanted him, they had to pack up and move from Los Angeles to San Francisco. Why? Because in his eyes, the Bay Area's metal scene was the real deal. Raw, supportive, and electric. Desperate to secure his genius, Metallica agreed, unknowingly making a decision that would change their future forever. This move didn't just finalize their lineup, it plugged them straight into the heart of the Bay Area thrash metal explosion, a scene that would catapult them to legendary status. Burton's impact was instant and undeniable. Lars Ulrich has spoken in multiple interviews about how Cliff injected a whole new energy into the band, one fueled by both his technical mastery and his vast musical influences. Unlike many metal bassists of the time, Burton didn't just draw inspiration from heavy music. He was obsessed with bands like Thin Lizzy and Rush, and even had a deep appreciation for classical composers. This diverse taste pushed Metallica into uncharted creative territory. As Ulrich put it, Cliff was the first guy who showed us that music didn't have limits. It didn't all have to be fast and aggressive. This influence became obvious on Metallica's debut album, Kill 'Em All. While most of the material had already been written before Burton's arrival, his presence was impossible to ignore. Take Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth, a jaw-dropping bass solo that Ulrich later called mind-blowing. This wasn't just a display of raw skill, it was a statement that Metallica wasn't afraid to break the mold. But Burton's genius wasn't limited to flashy solos or technical prowess. He quickly became a driving force in the songwriting process, shaping songs with an intricate, layered approach. James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich would bring in riffs, but it was Cliff who often suggested rearrangements or melodic touches that gave their music unexpected depth. His influence reached its peak on Ride the Lightning, especially with tracks like The Call of Cthulhu, where his vision transformed Metallica's sound into something more complex, more epic, and undeniably legendary. Despite his immense talent, Burton never felt the need to dominate the band dynamic. He carried himself with a quiet confidence, respected by all, but never seeking constant validation. Lars Ulrich once reflected in the Classic Albums documentary for Metallica, Cliff wasn't about ego, he didn't need to talk big or show off, he just let the music do the talking, and that was enough. And that's exactly what made him so powerful. As Metallica evolved, Burton became more than just a bassist, he was a creative force, subtly guiding the band toward their full potential without ever overshadowing the group's chemistry. But on September 27th, 1986, everything changed in an instant. Metallica's unstoppable rise came to a sudden and devastating halt. While traveling through Sweden on their European tour for Master of Puppets, disaster struck. Their tour bus, driving down an icy road in the early morning hours, lost control and overturned. In a cruel twist of fate, Cliff Burton, who had been sleeping in the top bunk near a window, was thrown from the vehicle and killed on impact. He was just 24 years old. The news sent shockwaves not only through the band, but across the entire metal world, leaving fans and musicians alike in mourning for a legend gone far too soon. Burton's death was an unfathomable loss, one that shattered Metallica to its core. For Lars Ulrich, that morning remains a haze of confusion and heartbreak. He's rarely spoken about it in detail, describing it in later interviews as something too painful to fully process. In an interview with Metal Hammer magazine, he reflected, "There's no textbook on how to deal with something like that. It just shattered everything." And it truly did. The crash sent Metallica spiraling into chaos. At the time, they were still an up-and-coming band, clawing their way to the top through relentless touring and an unbreakable bond. Losing Burton didn't just leave a hole in their lineup, it made them question if they could even go on. on. Ulrich later admitted that for a moment, he wondered whether Metallica should continue at all. But grief didn't come with a pause button. As much as they wanted to stop, the brutal reality of the music industry meant they had to keep moving or risk losing everything they'd built. Just 1 month after the tragedy, Metallica held auditions for a new bassist, but the process felt surreal. Ulrich described those weeks as an emotional fog. You're going through the motions, but nothing feels real. Moving forward wasn't an easy choice. It was a battle within itself. Some fans criticized Metallica for searching for a new bassist so soon after Burton's passing, accusing them of moving on too quickly. But for the band, this wasn't about brushing past their grief. It was about honoring Cliff's passion for the music. In the 2004 documentary Some Kind of Monster, James Hetfield put it plainly: Cliff wouldn't have wanted us to stop. He was about the music, and we had to keep going for him. While Ulrich wasn't as outspoken, he shared the same belief. Persistence was the only way to make sense of such an unimaginable loss. For Lars, Cliff's absence was especially complicated. They hadn't been the closest on a personal level, but their creative relationship was built on deep mutual respect. Burton had been a driving force behind Metallica's evolution, pushing them to explore new musical territory and break past the limits of traditional metal. And now, that force was gone. Ulrich admitted that finding someone who could even partially fill that void felt like an impossible task. Bringing in Jason Newsted marked the start of a new era for Metallica, but it didn't erase the pain of losing Burton. His death didn't just change the band musically, it hardened them as people, leaving scars that would never truly fade. The innocence and raw energy that defined Metallica's early years seemed to vanish after Burton's death, replaced by something sharper, an unbreakable focus on their careers. The tragedy forced them to grow up fast. From that point on, they weren't just a band making music, they became a symbol of resilience. Lars Ulrich later reflected on this shift, calling it an unwanted but defining lesson. He put it bluntly: you learn that things don't always go the way you think, and you have to move forward no matter how impossible it feels. Burton's loss wasn't just an ending, it was a turning point that shaped Metallica's survival instinct. It hardened them, giving them the drive to push through every challenge that followed. For Ulrich, the memories of that bus crash will always be painful, but they're also a reminder of what keeps Metallica going. The same passion for music that Cliff had lived for. But Burton's influence didn't fade with his passing. Even as the band evolved, his fearless approach to music remained woven into their DNA. He didn't just contribute ideas, he changed the way Metallica thought about creativity itself. In a 2009 interview with Classic Rock magazine, Ulrich reflected, "Cliff taught us that you don't have to fear stepping outside the box. He was the one always pushing us to take risks, and we've carried that with us ever since." One of the clearest signs of Burton's lasting influence came with And Justice for All, Metallica's first album after his tragic passing. While Jason Newsted had stepped in as bassist, the album's intricate compositions and dark brooding atmosphere bore Burton's unmistakable imprint. Nowhere was this more evident than in To Live Is to Die. The instrumental track not only featured riffs inspired by Burton, but also included lyrical fragments he had written before his death, making it both a tribute and a testament to his depth as a musician. Ulrich later described the song as a way to keep Cliff a part of what we were doing even after he was gone. But Burton's legacy wasn't just about the music, it was about a mindset. He had challenged Metallica to look beyond just heavy riffs and thrash aggression, pushing them to refine their sound and embrace complexity. Lars Ulrich has frequently credited Burton with changing his own approach to drumming, making him more conscious of dynamics and composition. In an interview with Ultimate Classic Rock, Ulrich recalled how Cliff would always say, "Think of the bigger picture in music." That philosophy played a crucial role in Metallica's evolution, steering them from pure thrash into a more expansive, layered sound. Even decades later, Burton's creative ethos continues to guide Metallica's decisions. As Ulrich told Metal Hammer in 2013, "Cliff was never someone who looked back. If he were here, I think he'd still be pushing us to do new things and explore new ideas." Ulrich's reflections on Burton haven't been without moments of self-critique. One of the most debated aspects of And Justice for All is the near absence of Jason Newsted's bass, which many fans saw as either a slight or an oversight. Addressing the controversy, Lars has been candid, explaining that the decision wasn't about disrespecting Newsted, but rather an unconscious result of their grief. In his own words, "We were still figuring out how to carry on without Cliff. Maybe we didn't get it right, but everything we did with the best intentions to honor what we thought he'd want." Despite that, Burton's creative legacy continues to ripple through Metallica's work even decades later. His influence isn't just heard in their music, but felt in the band's willingness to experiment and push boundaries. stories. From intricate song structures to their refusal to be confined by genre expectations, his philosophy remains a quiet but enduring presence in their artistry. For Lars Ulrich, honoring Burton isn't about dwelling on the past, it's about carrying forward a perspective that always strives for something greater. Though the band rarely speaks excessively about his influence, they've found ways to pay tribute both publicly and privately. Whether through dedicating songs, sharing stories, or carrying his mindset into their creative process, Cliff Burton remains an integral part of Metallica's identity, a reminder of where they came from and what still drives them forward. Ulrich has made it clear that honoring Burton isn't about nostalgia, it's about recognizing his impact as a permanent part of Metallica's DNA. One of the most significant tributes to Burton's legacy is Cliff Burton Day, officially recognized in Alameda County, California on February 10th, his birthday. When the designation was made in 2018, Lars expressed his appreciation, saying, "The amount of love and support for Cliff over the years has been incredible. It's a reminder of how much he meant not just to us, but to so many people around the world." Beyond official recognitions, Metallica has found subtle ways to keep Burton's presence alive. While they don't dedicate entire concerts to him, certain songs, especially instrumentals like Orion, often feel like silent tributes. In a recent interview with Mojo, Ulrich admitted that playing these tracks on stage keeps Burton's essence alive. When we play something like Orion, it's hard not to think about who helped bring those moments to life. It's like he's still with us in those notes. Through both grand gestures and quiet acknowledgements, Metallica ensures that Burton's spirit isn't just remembered, it remains a guiding force in their music and legacy beyond the stage. Metallica ensured that Cliff Burton's contributions were permanently etched into the metal community's history. One of the most significant moments came in 2009 when Burton was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame alongside Metallica. During the ceremony, Jason Newsted, who had never met Burton but deeply respected his legacy, spoke about the inspiration he provided. Lars Ulrich, as always, chose a more understated acknowledgement, ensuring Cliff's memory was honored without turning the moment into a spectacle. Perhaps the most meaningful tribute isn't in awards or ceremonies, but in Metallica's continued evolution as a band. Ulrich has consistently stated that their willingness to experiment and innovate stems in part from Burton's fearless approach to music. In a 2013 interview with Metal Hammer, he reflected, "Cliff wouldn't want us to be a band that just plays it safe. Continuing to take risks feels like the biggest respect we can show to his legacy." Decades later, Metallica's commitment to pushing boundaries remains one of the strongest ways they keep Cliff's spirit alive.